This week, I have the privilege of chatting with Caitlyn Howe, one of the incredible coaches at Fit for Service. As I was preparing this introduction, I started reviewing all of the notes I've written down during the group coaching call she's led. There are so many beautiful insights I could revisit that would serve that purpose, but simply put, Caitlyn has been my guiding light for how to live in deeper harmony with our divinity. In this episode, we dive into rituals and practices, what they are, why they are so important, and how we can all bring more of them into our lives. We explore joy, anger, nervousness, which can also be the other side of excitement, sadness, and the non-literal death of self. Caitlyn's guided meditations were one of my favorite parts of Fit for Service, often making the unconscious conscious for me. So I asked Caitlyn to do a short guided meditation at the very end of our conversation. You'll want to make sure you listen all the way through. If you have been enjoying the conversations, please take a moment to rate and review the Journey podcast on Apple, Google, YouTube, Spotify, or wherever else you have been listening. I'm not an expert, but I keep hearing that it's one of the most effective tools for growth on these platforms. So I'll be extremely grateful if you're able to help me on this journey I'm on with this podcast. And now, my conversation with Caitlyn Howe. Hi, Caitlyn.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm so very good today. So happy to be connecting.
I am so happy too. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation. You know, when I started the podcast, I was like, you were there on my list. And one morning I was doing yoga and I don't know, just like the idea of like these like, you know, rituals that are kind of missing from all of our lives came to mind. I was like, this is like a direct link to like Caitlyn. I was like, and I wrote you, like, I literally stopped my yoga and I wrote you and you wrote me back fairly quickly. And here we are.
And here we are. And it makes me just giggle with the magic because I recognize now more and more that I've been in ritual for a really long time, but the past year or so has bloomed into a whole new level of relationship with ritual. And I'm just now today coming out of a really deep and dynamic process, weaving all sorts of ritual into my life. And it has profoundly transformed me, profoundly. And I just feel like I closed my container with these specific practices yesterday. And so it just weaves in such a beautiful way. And it's so cool to be here and get to talk about it.
I was thinking of how to start our conversation. And actually the message that you left me this morning, you were talking about how you felt like the call to deepen, you know, your rituals and your practice. And before we jump into those, I was like, people often ask us like, what does the call feel like? You know, I've experienced it, but like, that's why I'm here in Costa Rica, is because I felt the call to be here. Like, I didn't know why, but it was like, just like I just knew I had to be here, and same for Divina. So can you talk a little bit about what Absolutely. Does the call feel like for you?
Yeah. So for myself, and I think for many of us, sometimes the call comes very loudly and disruptively in unexpected changes to the familiar world. So I feel like the call for me to drop into myself and really connect and start to cultivate a spiritual practice, which often involves ritual, is usually something historically has been something really challenging. It's like, you know, an unforeseen breakup, something changes in my work dynamic, or a financial stress, or, you know, in 2020, I think something that really deepened my own authentic yearning to connect with myself and presence to my spirituality and start to cultivate rituals that help me move through life was my father passing. And he got diagnosed with brain cancer in March of 2020, right as the pandemic set in. The pandemic itself was a call of sorts for many of us. And I think that it comes through that way for us when we are not tuned into our own inner compass that has this really clear, subtle communication that emerges as like a yes in the heart, or a call that feels like you get an opportunity or an invitation or an inkling, and it feels exciting, but it requires change. So if we're really aligned and feeling into our bodies and feeling our intuition, we'll get those calls when they're nice and quiet and they're little whispers from the soul. When we're disconnected from the body and when we say no to them, we may feel it and go like, oh, I can't do that. I can't move to Costa Rica. I can't, suddenly leave my relationship or suddenly shift direction in my career. When we say no, the call is still there, but it has to find us in a new way. And for me, I recognize, like, reflecting on my life, the reason that my calls to the hero's journey of sorts, or to transformation or change or deepening, were often so loud and so disruptive, is because I kept resisting the intuitive guidance that I was getting. And so it can be a really beautiful, sweet, quiet conversation with yourself where you feel your juicy yes, and you're like, oh, I want to do that, and it's scary, but because it's scary, I'm going to go ahead and do it. I'm going to really honor that intuitive calling. Or we can say, not yet, not yet, not yet. And then it might come in a really disruptive form, kind of like a lightning bolt that's like, nah, now.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm excited now. I've been working with my intuition and my own interior guidance in a really deep way, especially in the past 6 months. And I'm so excited for what life will feel like in just moment to moment, honoring those micro calls that feel like little whispers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you know that it's your intuition versus like your ego has taken on this like persona and is like, I'm just going to guide you this way because that's what I want to do?
The eternal question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a refining practice that we get to dance with forever, in a certain sense. Bless the people who are just know the clarity between ego and intuition. It's not always easy to discern. For me, what I've noticed is typically there, and I think this is why it's super important to really get familiar with the way your body communicates with you, because there are subtle differences for me with ego and intuition. And when my ego is trying to convince me that something is the right way, there's often a little signal, like for me, kind of in my sternum, like almost like a sinky feeling of like, that, you're acting in fear or scarcity or ego or pride or whatever the case may be. And I can kind of feel it in my gut. And then with the intuitive calling, it's more of you feel this excitement. It's like an excitement in my system. It registers as there may be fear because there probably is a change or something uncomfortable or scary or just really different in the call. Maybe it's going against what I want, right? Like if I want to, go have margaritas with my friend and my mind has already decided that, but my intuition's like, drop what you're doing and drop into, writing this piece or something like that. I can feel my consciousness try to convince me that, I should go this other way. And I can feel the possibility of excitement that it would be to liberate myself from obligation and just drop into the present moment. And it feels like an opening. So for me, in my body, intuition feels like an opening with a little bit of excited trepidation. Like there's a membrane to break through here. But I know that on the other side of it, it would feel really good. And so when people ask me this question, I would say the first thing to do is always run the experiment. You have to kind of play with these cues from your body to discern what your communication is. And so as you build that communication, as you feel that cue or that inkling, and you start to feel the yes in your body, but you feel the fear and you do it anyway, and you learn the sensation that's on the other side of that, and you get the affirmation that's on the other side of that, you have strengthened that pathway with intuition. And sometimes we run the experiment of ego, and often we realize that it crashed and burned, or we have, for me on the other side of ego is sort of this sinking feeling. I would almost equate it to guilt in my nervous system. It's kind of like, you were just, you were just moving in your pride and you knew you shouldn't do this. And now I feel the weight of that. I feel that healthy guilt is a really, really paralyzing emotion, but as it registers in the nervous system, it can be useful in terms of just discerning, this was for me or this wasn't for me. And now I can learn from that place and I can move differently next time. And when I feel this in my body's intelligence, I can honor it and I can start to build these strong relationships with the communication I'm getting with my body.
Yeah. One thing I've noticed too is when it's for the ego, it usually operates on a shorter timeline. It's like it wants the results, like quickly. Whereas if it's like more from a divine intuitive place, it doesn't have a timeline. Maybe sometimes it'll be a week, a month, a year. I feel like I'm in the process of some things that, might take 10, 20, 30, 100 years to come to fruition.
Absolutely. I'm so happy that you named that. The ego always wants everything fast. Yeah. It wants it now. And boy, we're in for a rude awakening when we don't really surrender and listen to the process. And I think intuition is often guiding us, absolutely often guiding us to the small, subtle steps that are going to take us farther in the bigger picture. So I love that. Totally resonate.
When did you, how did spirituality find you? Or when did you realize that there was, you were able to tap into something that was deeper than your ego?
Oh man, it's been a journey. I'd say it's been a long journey and a slow journey for me. And there's a little bit of, I'm still working on my shame with my own pacing, because the soul is on its own timeline. And my soul was up against a lot. I had a lot of deeply ingrained patterns of behavior that I was really attached to. And I always wanted to believe that I was farther along in my journey than I really was, because I didn't understand the depth and the breadth of the spiritual path and how it never ends. And it's just like a flower that just keeps opening into infinity. It's a beautiful, endless process. And thank goodness that it is. But I'd say it began for me. I had what you would call the dark night of the soul. My dark night of the soul was actually about 10 years ago after a big breakup. And I responded to my pain by really going into it and exacerbating it a lot with a lot of avoidance. So I was really resistant to feeling the depth of my pain. And I spent probably 2 years, 3 years, just running from it in every sense. And I could feel gradually in that process, getting lost in addiction and relationships that didn't serve me and pathways that didn't serve me. I could feel this real, what it felt like in my system was like, I'm dying, but spiritually I felt, and maybe even, there were days that felt like close to physical death. I just didn't know, I had nothing left in my spirit. And it took me hitting that rock bottom to really want it for myself, to want change for myself, to want a relationship with, the divine, with what we would call God. And my first step was actually just to re-engage my creativity. That was when I reclaimed my writer's path, which I had abandoned since I was a kid. I always knew I wanted to be a writer. And but I had been on this adventure in life, and I was, I was the fun girl. I was always at parties. I was throwing parties. I was really having a good time, but I wasn't really feeding my dharma. And so the first way I pulled myself out of that hole was writing. And I think, when we look at the spiritual path, sometimes we think, oh, it has to be like an ayahuasca journey, right, or some, spiritual awakening that comes in the rays of God. But it can be just you reconnecting to your purpose and your truest passion. And really, I think we even get lost in purpose. A lot of the time when we're in that dark night, or we're in our rock bottom, we want purpose. We want to understand. That's the ego like grasping. What am I supposed to do? Do what you love, right? So like that was my first step, was just doing what I love. And that led me to ayahuasca. I also went and did ayahuasca, which was helpful.
That too. Yeah.
That too. And started studying Kundalini Yoga, and it filled my heart, it filled my soul, and it pulled me out. And yet I was still really comfortable being the person I knew myself to be. So I tried to do both, right? I was like, I'm going to do this sometimes. I'm going to dip my toes in, have a deep ayahuasca experience. I'm going to write some poetry. And then I'm going to spend 3 months, behaving the way that I've always behaved. And so my path was spiral and slow. Yeah. It was like, it wasn't until, I guess, about 6-7 years later that I really entered a path of service, that I really started to reorient myself slowly to something greater than me, and the beauty and the joy of that. And so stepping into service, as at that point I had done so many beautiful practices that helped illuminate my life, from my Kundalini Yoga practice, meditation, sweat lodge, a variety of other psychedelic journeys and plant medicine journeys that helped crack me open gradually and just erode the layers of identity, that I started to feel really called to serve. And that was a big shifting point for me. And it's just had more layers, more and more layers, with my father dying. And then again this year, revelations continue. And I think for me, what's really shifted in my life in the past 2 years has been doing it because I love it. I think sometimes we come to these spiritual crossroads from a place of, I should, I need, there's more of a frequency in it of, I need to fix myself, rather than this pure devotion of, I love this. And that's where it really breaks through. When you start to show up because you love it, and not because something's wrong with you and because you need to fix yourself and you need to be different. When you're just who you are and you're showing up to spirit because you love to be there, that's where it really changes.
I got full body shivers on that one. It was kind of like that for me this morning. It's our first day back after 3 weeks in Canada for the holidays, and, indulging in the food and the wine and all the good stuff. And so, my own practices kind of took a little bit of a backseat during that time, and I didn't put too much guilt or shame on it. I was like, you know what, we're here and we're enjoying ourselves. But this morning I just opened my eyes at like 5:30, and the sky was just like turning orange a little bit with the sunrise. And we're in a house with like an incredible view and beautiful trees. And I try to close my eyes, or like, not me, like a part of me try to close my eyes again, be like, just go back to sleep. And then the other part of me, like, got way loud and was like, get the fuck outside right now. And I just enjoyed it. And I had like no intention with it. I just sat there and took in all of the sounds of like the jungle, just like waking up around us. And it felt so good. It's like what you were saying, like the spiritual practice, like it should feel good. It shouldn't be like something that you feel obliged to do, because that just sets you up for failure.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. There's a pressure that falls on your shoulders that's just too big to bear, when it's, you're just adding to the to-do list. It's like, I got to do my morning practice, not I get to. And what does it look like today? Because it's what I want, but yeah. And we go through those cycles. I love that you named that too. Like, I think we can sometimes think of the spiritual path as like, once you go down that direction, you got to do it every day. And it's always got to look like this. And it's just a total change. There's seasons to everything. Yeah. And we need to be gentle with ourselves so we can continue to love it. And so it can be fresh and transformative and flowy. And we're not just, in renunciation of all different forms of this life, because sometimes there's going to be 3 weeks of wine and holidays and family time. And that just makes it the juice even sweeter when we return to it.
Yeah, it really does. And kind of what you were saying before, like, I don't know if you feel that way too, but the parties now, like when you go to a party, instead of being kind of like mindlessly going about it, now you go into like with more awareness. They're just so much more fun too. Like I love parties way more than I did before.
Totally. Same. Yeah. I did do something for New Year's Eve this year. I actually, for myself, I went through a big shift over the past 3 months. And my last hurrah was Halloween, and I did it really big. And after that, I was really laying it down. I was like, I need the consistency right now. I need a good steady break from all of the sensory input that's going to cue certain behaviors potentially in me and certain responses. And that's what I needed at this point. But I did go back into the fray, so to speak, and went to a big dinner for New Year's Eve with sparklers and the whole nines, and confetti poppers and glasses of champagne. And it was beautiful. And it was like I was really in it. I was really present. It wasn't dutiful. It wasn't autopilot. It wasn't, familiar anymore. And so it made it even more fresh and even more living to be there and to be in that experience. And I felt really centered in myself. And so I love the seasons now. It's like, I want those nice, deep journeys into myself and into spirit. And then those, joyful, not escapes, but just adventures. They're adventures and they're connective. Like parties are beautiful. I love, at our summit in Fit for Service over the summer, when Charles Eisenstein talked about the value of festivals and how we need them. We need to connect with each other. And they're really these, these beautiful places of sanity where we're all in our full revelry and full expression. And it's part of the spiritual path too.
Yeah, I mean, it goes without saying, but the summits of last year were, definite highlights for me. Like I just enjoyed it so much. It was like stepping into alternate universe for a week and then, experiencing just so much. Yeah.
They're so good. It's such a beautiful space to connect and discover yourself and be in that full expression, whether we're having a dance party or crying in each other's arms or whatever it is. It was a powerful year.
Yeah. Is there a difference between a ritual and a practice for you, or do those signify the same thing?
I would say yes. For me, they're similar. I would say, let's define those. So for me, a practice is probably something that I do regularly because I know it is beneficial and useful to my being or to the world in some form. But I can do a practice without being there necessarily, in reverence. I think there's a reverent quality to ritual and a creative quality to ritual for me that distinguish it from a practice. And practice is another defining aspect of that for me. Is typically there's something I learned or received from somebody else. So, when I go do my cold plunge, that is a practice that I learned, from Wim Hof and Kyle Kingsbury and some of my, other friends that I adopted. And it's really helpful. It helps my nervous system. It's undoubtedly something that I want to consistently be doing for the rest of my life. But when I go, I don't always drop into it with the full fabric of my being. I'm not always in a reverent state. Sometimes I am. Sometimes when I'm really turned on and connected, I will use that opportunity to have it be a meditation, to really engage a conscious relationship with my nervous system and pay attention to what's happening and allow my face to be soft and peaceful, and use that as a meditative practice that actually translates to the rest of my life. But there are plenty of days where I go do it, and the whole time I'm in the cold, I'm like, my face is like, in a contortion, and I'm thinking about the next thing that I'm going to do. With ritual, for me, most of my rituals, that's not even true. Some of my rituals I have adopted from other people and made my own. And many of them were self-originating. They were emergent creations of reverence that came through me, probably woven by many experiences and influences, but they became my own creation that was like really born of reverence and love and a sense of divine connection. And yeah, I think those are kind of the distinguishing factors. And there are many, like ritual for me is ever changing and flowing, and practice too. Like I won't always be consistent with a certain practice. I pay attention to seasons. There were times where I did morning Kundalini sadhana, at sunrise for a period of time. That wasn't sustainable for me. That was ritual and it was reverent, but it also was many days I was just forcing it. I was tired, but I was like, it was more like the harsh devotion. Like you gotta be consistent. And that there's value to that, but it wasn't sustainable for me forever. So now, I may do yoga or mantra or cold plunge consistently as a practice. And when that doesn't feel alive for me anymore, that'll change. Ritual is very textured for me and it grows, it like blooms, kind of like the spiritual path. It blooms. I'll start with one ritual and more will emerge from it. And I discover more of what it wants to be. And then I bring it in small ways. So yeah, it's a really dynamic and juicy practice. And it's personal, it feels like personal to everyone.
Yeah. So I'm doing ayahuasca in early March. And I felt like it was such an interesting moment to do it because it's just 2 months into the year. So, and with the new year, I kind of told myself, you know what, I'm going to dive into some kind of ritual, getting myself ready. We did it last time as well, but I don't know, here the timing with the 2 months was just so perfect. And so, cutting out like cannabis, which I know you don't need to cut out like 2 months ahead of doing ayahuasca, but for me, I don't know, that's like the ritual of preparation for something big like this that I really go into with a lot of reverence and respect for. Yeah, that's where I'm seeing myself. Like, still don't know what the rest of the 8 weeks are going to look like, but I feel like I'm in some kind of ritual right now, getting myself ready for that.
Absolutely. I love that. And I think it's a really important thing to touch on, because something that I've learned is when we don't know, like ayahuasca, I've done it. I've sat with the medicine 15 times at least now. Every time is different. Every time I thought I knew what I was going to expect, even night to night. I have one experience, I go to sleep. I think it's going to build on that, totally different. So we're always moving into the unknown. We're always moving towards the mystery. But when we can create a ceremonial container like you have with ayahuasca, where it's like, I know there's a big threshold for me here. How can I show up in reverence to that? And the sooner you do it, the more powerful the threads will become. I had a really dynamic experience recently that I recognized at the end. I recognized how much of 3 months of devotion in many different ways wove into this fabulous, climactic, extremely powerful, true magical experience, because I had been in my devotion for 3 months and allowing it to ebb and flow. And you'll probably find that with your, your devotion and saying, I'm going to lay down cannabis. I'm going to go into this dieta early. More information, so to speak, will continue to flow into you and make your process even more intricate and even more deep. And it does amplify the medicine that you receive at the end of that mystery school, so to speak. So I'm very excited for you.
Yeah, last time we did the full like 2 weeks, of like eating rice and beans and like almost nothing else. And I swear, like a week in, we're just like standing in the kitchen, like sobbing, like like we still had a long time to go, but it was just like we were like naked, like you're not having coffee anymore. You can't reach into the pantry for like a little snack here and there. You're super strict with everything. Like all these little comforts that you're so used to are completely vanished. And you're just super raw. And so many things started coming up before we even travel to sit with Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, they say as soon as you decide to go into ceremony,
Right.
it begins. As soon
It
as you
sure does.
decide. And
Yeah.
maybe even as soon as maybe even before you decide. But as soon
Yeah.
as your intuition, brings the call, there's
Yeah.
subtle ceremony that begins, and it's
Yeah.
amplified with every commitment.
It's been interesting because I feel like I've had a couple things potentially come into like my life and my schedule that would have forced me to postpone that trip. But every time somehow that thing just like didn't work out or vanished. So it's still on the schedule and there's no running away from it.
Yep, that's a good thing,
Yeah.
because if it's working, you'll want to run away from it at some point, but
Yeah.
that's part of the medicine too.
Yeah. So back to rituals, there's no school of magic yet, as I like to call it, although Fit for Service kind of comes pretty close to that in my experience. But how can we go about learning these rituals? Like, how does one figure out where to start if they're not sure where to start?
Okay, so this is a beautiful question, and I'd love to share just a little bit about my journey and the rituals that I do, because for me, my ritual practice is guided by a weaving of both my own intuitive calling and my relationship with the field of life. So when we are interested in something, so let me give a little bit of an example. In 2020, to use the example of my father's passing, which was a big call to transformation, it was like it really illuminated for me the deeper longings of my heart and soul. What I want from my life, what I want to appreciate, how I want to walk, what I want to accomplish before I die, because I don't know when that will be. It was a big wake up moment. I wasn't totally ready for everything that I saw, but I had that call, I had that moment. And when I returned to life, after caring for him and being with my family, I wanted to really recommit to my writing practice. And so I found this woman. Her name's Danielle Dolskie. She's like a legit badass poet queen witch. She wrote she wrote a book that I was really, really in love with, and the title is for some reason escaping me in the moment. But the point being, I just felt called to work with her. I felt this calling. I was like, I want to work with her. I knew nothing about the way that she worked, but she was doing a memoir writing women's circle. So I just signed up. It was like, this is my inkling, this is the call. And so the field was kind of informing me by just, I'm in a bookstore, I find her book, it really speaks to me, I devote to it. I do some of the practices, and her book had a lot of ritual in it, which at first, to be honest, I thought was really over the top. It was like stuff like painting your face with mud and, doing all this stuff that at that time didn't fully resonate with me, but her writing did, and her style did. And so with time, I built more of a relationship with the book, and I show up to this writer's circle, and it's set in a container of, really using this Celtic wisdom and these old pagan traditions as a container for the writing. So we had a circle of 13 women, and there was ritual in everything. Every time we sat for a call, she pulled an ogham stick for us. And it was beyond me at that point, but it was starting to inform me in this really beautiful synchronistic way. It was like, I wasn't seeking it, but it found me because I just felt that call. And we moved out of the container, and there were certain aspects of our process that stuck with me. And it was like, I want to keep these. I like these rituals, and I brought them into my own life. And simultaneously, I was in the pandemic, crisis of last year, where a lot of us, there was no vaccine yet. There weren't really outlets. We were in the super unknown of this thing. And so I spent the holidays separated from my family because of that fear. And I didn't have much to do with myself. I was at home most of the time. I didn't go to the office anymore. And so I built an altar for Yule based on what I'd learned with Danielle. And I allowed that altar. And Yule begins on I opened it on this winter solstice, and it begins, around Christmas time and moves through January 5th. And I was just like, I don't know what else to do with myself, but I'm craving connection to the divine, to me. And I allowed this altar to kind of show me what wanted to be there. I used a lot of intuitive information from my own psyche as well, like things I loved. And so for me, I had a relationship with my dreams where I would see the color red in my dreams that were really big dreams. And it became this signal to me that this is a soul level dream. This is something to pay attention to. This is informing your path. And with that relationship to my dreams, I developed a relationship to the color red. It just became my soul color. So I started to bring that into my altar. I started to notice red in the world, rose, and there was this interesting, just emergent dance between my own internal guidance and the field. And so I started really loving being at an altar. And this could look different for anyone, because I'm really passionate about an altar space. We actually have them everywhere. Like I'm at a desk right now. This is an altar. It's its own altar. It has a candle on it now because I call that in, but it is an altar to my creation, my creative work. We often have altars around the television set. We have altars next to our bed in the bedstand. So we do this already as human beings. We're ritualistic creatures. And if we pay attention, we probably notice we have ritual in our life. And even if we don't call it that. And I would say, ritual is probably defined by, do I do it because I love it? Or do it because I believe it has power? And so we do things regularly because we love them or because we believe that they actually have power in our lives to change something or to set a certain tone or to direct us in some way. And when we start to consciously create these rituals and imbue them with love and the information that the field is giving to us and the information that's moving through us is intuition, it becomes really rich and beautiful. And the micro rituals that have been born from that time I spent in deep devotion to daily ritual. For me, daily ritual was, because I love it, I'm going to sit down at my altar every night. I'm going to talk to God, and it's a conversation. It's like, hello, God, it's me, your daughter, Caitlyn. I am here. This is how I'm feeling right now. Thank you for this. This is what I need help with. That prayer is a ritual. From that point, so much was born. And now I have many, many different little rituals. Like, I want to spray myself with a specific spray every day because I'm setting an intention with that. And it's, I'm calling in this intention when I spray on my face. I wear this ring with a red drop of blood because it was born of that ritual, and on and on. And so we get to play with this in this really beautiful way. And I can definitely talk about some ritual suggestions, but to go back to your question, like if somebody's like, where do I begin? First and foremost, just pay attention to what you already love. Start there. What do you love? And what are some beautiful ways that you can honor what you love regularly in a dialogue? I feel like it's a devotional practice in the sense that we're building an intimate relationship with what we love that actually it's almost a reverent reciprocity that says, I see you, I love you, I'm showing up to you consistently every single day. And you can start with little practices, maybe that's prayer. Maybe that's meditation in the sunlight as the sun is rising. Maybe that is, giving yourself a bath with special salts and oils and giving yourself a massage once a week on this specific night. And it's like a date with yourself, like giving yourself artist dates or self-care dates can be a ritual. It doesn't have to look super witchy and intricate, as some of mine do, but we can start small and allow that to blossom into something that's really self-created and really dynamic and beautiful.
It's beautiful. One thing that I got from you this past year is also about using rituals to anchor specific experiences instead of necessarily trying to call something in or setting the stage for something. A good example, and we can kind of start going through the 5 specific settings or situations where you might want to have a ritual practice, is joy. Like on a day where like you're just like beaming with life and you're just feeling how incredible it is. For me, it's like warm summer days on the lake and everybody's swimming and the water is a little bit cold, but not cold enough to keep you out of the water. And then you feel the sun on your face and the music is playing. Everything is just like, wow, like it's so beautiful and simple, but beautiful. And then like a few times this summer, at the end of the day, I just like walk back into the house and just like literally like put my hands in prayer and be like, thank you for this incredible day, where I just feel like I'm so alive. And I can't say that it became like a consistent ritual, but there's at least that like recognition, on those like special days around joy. Like, yes, we can try to call it in, but it's also about like anchoring it. And then those days become really engraved in memory afterwards.
Absolutely. I love that, engraved in memory. Yes. Gratitude. Best ritual you can create for yourself, in my opinion, in any form. It acknowledges, it has the dialogue with life that acknowledges the abundant flow of love that is here. Even if that's on a day that you don't love. And I love the scene you just painted, the way that you just described that beautiful summer day. It's like I could
take it's real. It's real.
Yeah. Because you remember and right? You have anchored in your gnosis through gratitude and reveling and savoring the sensory experience of that. So big full fuck yes to gratitude for those days, and calling it in by acknowledging the gratitude that's there for the hard days. Like, what can you really find when we commit to a gratitude ritual? That can be the end of the day. Like, I'm not turning off the light on the bedside table until I honor what I am grateful for today, even if it was a hard day, even if all I've got is a lesson. There has to be some food in my belly. I am breathing clean air. I'm laying on this bed. Like, when we open that door of gratitude, there's actually always so much there. So we are informing our own psyche and having a dialogue with life that affirms what we are grateful for. And then it becomes more powerful. And that's the beauty of ritual is, like I said, we believe in its power. It has power. The repetition and the reverence in ritual actually empowers the experience that we are anchoring to. And it calls in more of that. It has wild magical power. And magical is a word that some of us, retract from. But when we engage in ritual, we're actually agreeing to the magic. And then the magic can actually become real. And that's really important. Like, why not? Right?
It's one of my favorite words these days, like magic. Once you like have a felt sense of like, this gratitude just like carrying on from like day to day and, bringing in more things that you can be grateful for, like magic does become real, and not like in the sense of card tricks and rabbits out of hats, but like real life magic. It's pretty amazing. Yeah.
It's a real thing.
Yeah. I don't know if you heard my testimonial for Fit for Service, but I refer to it as like a Hogwarts school of magic. Like, that's really what it is. Yes, like, we're not walking around with like sticks and doing potions and shit, but you learn how to call in these things and how to bring in more of this real life magic into your life.
Yeah, just by acknowledging it. And
Yeah.
participating, rituals participation too. It's that's another piece is like, I'm going to show up and do my part by
Yeah.
just being here and activating it and creating the container and everything. Life is a ceremony, and every single day can be. And definitely these big experiences, the beautiful ones and the ones that we want to anchor in the wisdom that we've gained from them, our ceremony. You don't close ceremony without taking something away and giving something back. You set the container, you acknowledge like this was ceremony, and this is the emergent wisdom that I gained. This is the gifts. Thank you, thank you, thank you to this container, to this relationship that was created here, to this intention that was set. Thank you to all aspects that inform this experience. Thank you. And I will honor it by moving forward and living in the wisdom that I gained from that. So when we have a big experience, whether that's beautiful or challenging, and we can create a ritual from it, we're actually bringing the wisdom or the insight from our experience and grounding it into everyday life. And so, like for me with ayahuasca, my last journey in September, that was all about my body. And the medicine showed me you can do all the work in your mind, you can do all the spiritual practices, but until you reconnect and come into union with your body's intelligence, you're never going to make the breakthroughs in your emotional patterns and your relationship patterns and so forth that you're seeking. And one of her insights for me was, every single day, connect with your body first. And that can look, that new ritual for me is before I even get out of bed, never mind all the witchy woo-woo stuff I do at my altar later in the day. But there's a ritual where I lay there and I animate my body and I start to roll my wrists and watch my fingers come to life and watch my toes start to move. And I rub my belly and I take a deep breath. And before I grab my phone, before I set my foot on the floor, I've acknowledged the life in my body, and I offered that to me. Here's a gift. This is really big and really helpful. And I honor that ceremony and that container by carrying it forward every day, and it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we touched on joy. What about anger? Like when you feel like you're carrying anger, what kind of ritual or practice can you develop around that? I have one that I think you'll appreciate.
I'd love to hear it.
So Davina was taking new photos for me for, just for me to have content. The businessy side of things, we have to do if we want to be sharing stuff. But we found ourselves in like shallow ocean water, and I can't remember how it came to me, but I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna release some anger right now. I'm not even angry about anything, but I'm gonna release some anger. And I just started pounding the ocean water with my fists as hard as I could.
Yes.
And it felt so good because, it's like you're using force, but you're not hurting anyone. You're not hurting yourself. But there was a giant reaction in the form of like this water just like splashing everywhere all over my face and like salt flying in my eyes. And it's like intense, but totally innocent. And I felt at least 20 pounds lighter at the end of it.
Good,
And I don't even know what I was angry about.
I feel better listening to your ritual. That's incredible.
I don't know what I was angry about or what I was carrying, but it was gone and I felt better after.
I'm so happy you asked me this because that is one of the emotions that I've been the most uncomfortable to be in. And I didn't even realize it. I just thought I'm a happy person. I'm really go with the flow. I'm so unconditional. Like I can be in this higher perspective and I'm comfortable there. And I didn't recognize until really the past 6 months of my inner work really revealed to me a whole reservoir of this primal, forceful anger. And some of it came with, to be honest, like the experience of just being a woman in this world. That was a part of the anger that I hadn't honored, because there were so many times where I felt fear and transgression that I just was agreeable and got small and got polite to avoid danger or discomfort or rejection or whatever it was, didn't realize that, you know, that doesn't go anywhere. Like, unless we have a ritual where we honor it and express it, like anger, expression. And it can look like so many things, but until we create these opportunities, like you did for yourself in the water, like we don't even need to understand them. But can I call that in and open that door so I can actually let some of this energy flow and be what it wants to be, because it's energy. So for me, as I had some triggering experiences that activated anger in me, and I realized this volcanic sensation in my body that was like, oh, I've been repressing this experience for a really long time. And a few of the things that I do and did do and will continue to do with anger is, for one, there are different levels. I think dancing from a more like gentle place, like say you want to engage your anger, there's some powerful fucking songs that you can put on. And even if you're not angry, like you did with the ocean, it's going to tap that. And you will get the opportunity to somatically release this from this pent up reservoir of whatever you haven't yet felt, or you're doing it on behalf of everyone because it's energy, right? And it needs to come through. So dancing, breath work is another practice. I would say breath work is so powerful for me. I wouldn't say like a deep breath work journey would be a ritual. It would be a periodic ceremony, which is a form of ritual, but more it's a deeper dive. For me, ritual breath is gentler and wouldn't necessarily tap the anger, but a practice with breath can really be a powerful outlet for anger, and often is. And under anger in breath work, I typically find tears, and then those get an opportunity to flow. And what I did this time when my anger came up that was super cool and new is I went to a rage room, which I didn't even know was a thing.
Right.
And it was so cool. You put on pads and like a helmet and the full, gear. And they have steel pipes and baseball bats and breakables and appliances. I went with two of my girlfriends. I'm getting goosebumps feeling it because these women I was with, particularly one was so docile and so chill and so timid. She struggled with anxiety all of the time, small in her voice, the energy that came through her. She at one point physically, manually ripped apart an oven and threw it against the wall. And she weighs about 95 pounds. And the layers that came through, as I smashed one thing after another, this relationship, my father dying, the suffering of my mother, my suffering, like layer upon layer upon layer, as you just open that portal and allow it. So if you can find a rage room or create one, they're very, they're very intense. When I first walked in, I was like, I feel some fear, like with these jagged edges and this, because you don't see things like that in a healthy context often. So that was fascinating and powerful. And just simply expressing physically, I've been working with a practice where when I feel a challenging, quote unquote, challenging emotion is just energy. It's available to us to look at emotion as not good or bad, but it's just either dense, heavy, overwhelming. We can feel the texture of emotion instead of judging it. And when we do that, we can open up to what does the emotion want to do? And asking that question. So if we feel sadness, what does the sadness want to do? If we feel anger, what does the anger want to do? And I did a really powerful practice with my anger through a dream that I had. It was a dream that triggered my body, and I was holding it for a couple of days. And when I went into the anger, I had the opportunity, with some pillows on the floor to just go, what does this anger want to do? And I wanted to choke the life out of the predator in the dream. And that was a symbol for something in my life. But I got to use that as just like an entry portal. Go into your anger, see what your body wants to do. Because a lot of us have memories and experiences that we can't recapture in our conscious mind, but the body remembers. So the body, even if we don't think that we are actively angry about something, the body may still be angry about something that happened when we were 3 years old or 7 years old or 16 years old. And when we just give it permission, like, what do you want to do? I feel this trigger. I feel this anger. The body will show you exactly what it needed to do in that moment. And you needed to punch in the ocean, which is a beautiful practice because you get all of that engagement with the water and the reaction of the water. And for me, it was interestingly to choke and to scream and express in that way. So expression, whether that's dance, breath, emotional expression, physical expression. And, finally, I'd say there's a lot with anger. I'd say one thing that I have learned from anger that's a really beautiful other opportunity is a new ritual I have with that is when I feel anger, can I feel this power? It usually for me wants to be power. And power, when it's claimed, when we don't thrash against it and feel shame for feeling it, and we just breathe it into ourselves, we get so big. And like it's actually energy force to accomplish things in our day. So if I don't let it sit in my head like this dense little like roadblock, and I start ruminating on it and feeling, victimized, if I let my body absorb it and claim it as power, I may have a badass poem come through. I may clean my entire house. I may, get a bunch of shit done because my body has taken on the energy as fuel. Yeah.
That's so important to recognize that it's just like energy, that like needs to move out, and it is intense. And then to quote you back for something you said, that it takes physical energy to dissociate from those feelings or emotions. So one way or another, you're going to be like dealing with this like energy. You might as well, alchemize it into something good instead of using another type of energy to disengage from it.
I love that you named that.
You said that first, so I'm just quoting you back.
Yeah, just naming it in the conversation. I was really affirmed through our friend Stephen Jackers, who, he says like numbing is an active process. We don't even recognize how much energy we're giving away and compartmentalizing these emotions. And so when we take the initiative to engage them, we get that energy back because it doesn't have to spend all that time holding it for us.
Yeah. This is also a good reminder for me about with our kids, who I think more intuitively will want to release their anger, even if we don't agree with what they're angry about, always. But I don't want them to grow up, by default suppressing their anger and then, having to relearn how to release the anger when they do it already by default, on their own. I think, it's a reminder for me to just guide them into a healthier outlet for their anger instead of, hitting their sibling or throwing shit on the ground or whatever. But maybe we'll build them. Yeah. We'll build them a little rage room in the house.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, like here's a way to let that flow. You can't do it everywhere just because we're in agreement with this, this world that we navigate, but teaching them that it's okay. We're animals. One of my favorite writers, Mary Oliver, she has a poem, Wild Geese, that's my favorite of all time. And the line in it that has stayed with me is, you don't have to be good. You don't have to walk for 100 miles in the desert on your knees repenting. You just have to let the soft animal of the body love what it loves. And that's something that we've lost as human beings because we don't allow the animal body to just do what it needs to do, whether that's dance or be affectionate or scream or shake or whatever the natural response that the animal kingdom gives itself full permission to do, and children do as well. And that's what we get away from in our minds. So
Yeah. And then it creates this like discomfort. And then we go and numb the discomfort because we can't identify what it is. And then, we end up in this like tailspin.
100%.
Yeah. All right. Next, I wrote nervousness, but for me, it's also kind of like the other coin of excitement. And the way I experienced this was when we sat with ayahuasca. The place I went to, they would do most nights was like 30 minutes of silence before any kind of music or anything would start. So, you take your drink and you go and sit on your mat and you got 30 minutes to just like wait and see what shit happens, and it's completely dark, completely silent. And I just remember like the nerves building up and like my heart beating a little bit faster. And then you hear like one person puking in the bucket and you're like, oh shit, am I next? And the nerves kind of like amplify now. And then I went like really just like observant about it. I was like, you know what? Hold on one second. I feel fine. Nothing bad is happening right now. What is this feeling that I'm actually feeling? And it was just like the darkness and the silence. And right away I saw it as like the opportunity for anything to happen in that space. And the nervousness just completely flipped on its head. Sorry, there's a lot of birds singing right now. They're in agreement.
They resonate.
Yeah. The nervousness turned into like pure excitement. And I was like, all right, I'm ready. Let's go. Let's, see what happens during this ceremony. And it was a good time. But yeah, how can we honor feeling nervous, which is on the other side of excitement, or feeling excited and then maybe feeling nervous?
I love what you said. I think that is the doorway to a different experience of the same thing. Nervousness is absolutely excitement in, the same coin. And this just takes a moment of pause and will to just open to what else it can be. And it takes some commitment, I would say in my experience, we have the opportunity with our free will, which is not always crystal clear. It often is informed by our nervous system. It's informed by our experiences. Some might argue that we don't have free will. I will argue back that we have enough to shift with a moment of presence and reorientation. And that takes practice. It takes practice. It takes using those emotions as a compass just to pause. And so if we're experiencing, I would say the spectrum, even if we didn't even want to call it a two-sided coin, the spectrum is like nervousness is like kind of in between excitement and fear. These are a full range of sort of similar activating energies that can arise in us and create either enthusiasm or resistance. And so do we want resistance or do we want enthusiasm? And so when we get to really get clear with ourselves and say, well, I don't know what I'm going to experience, but I get to choose at least to pause into asking myself, do I want to allow for enthusiasm or do I want to fight what's coming anyway, or say no to it? Which then I'll never know that opportunity that you described, right? The opportunity to find out what's on the other side of it. So there's almost like this, it's a warrior energy. It's a moment of pause that says, I'm moving into the unknown. I feel this activation of energy in my body. Can I hold it like a warrior going into the unknown and claim it as my opportunity to find out what happens? I think of an experience, one that was really big for me this year was leading my first ecstatic dance that was non-fit for service. There was a ton of fit for service members there.
Yeah, it was right before. Right.
Yeah, exactly. But it was open to the public. So that was new for me because it's out of my comfort zone. And it was a bigger crowd. Like I only worked with, maybe 30 people in an ecstatic dance, or 50. I think 50 was the max. This was up to 150 people. I couldn't sleep the night before. I had done it before. It was like, I love it. This is one of my passions. But something about the new container of it was just rocking me. I was in my full inner child, shy girl, like all in my head, super nervous, frazzled. And I put it, but I had to show up, and I wanted to show up. It was like, what are the options here? Say no because I'm scared or nervous? Like, no way, I'm not going to do that. So the option is go into it. And I did. And I got on that stage, and it was the greatest flow experience of my life. I've never felt better to this day than I did when I stepped off that stage. And that's available to us on the other side of nervousness. So it's an exercise, it's a muscle that we have to flex. And the more that we do it, we get to show up to life like a warrior. So it's these little choice points of free will that just say, I want to know what's available to me in this opportunity. And I want to be brave. And like, can we make that prayer to bravery? Am I going to be brave in this moment? And can I be enthusiastic about the courage that I'm capable of? Even if it feels like a small bit of courage, it matters. And then we get to empower ourselves in every bigger instance where the courage is that's required is bigger and the stakes may be higher, and we get to find out what's on the other side. So little choice points. Yeah.
I feel like we should all experience nervousness more often because it means you're on the brink of something exciting.
100%. I love that you said that, because that's another thing that stuck with me is fear, nervousness. It can be a compass to go towards something. Like, what if you made that commitment that every single time you felt nervous, you definitely did it? Like, how much does your life change? It's huge. It's huge. It's the doorway to growth.
Yeah. All right. Next, I wrote down sadness, and I have something with you in common with losing our dads. My dad passed away a little over 5 years ago, and it was sudden. It was like he had a Facebook post, that morning, and 30 minutes later he was, he had passed away. And to this day, I'm still not sure if I've grieved it all. I feel like I don't think I have an unhealthy relationship with it, but at times I do, question myself. Do I have more to grieve? Especially now that I feel like I've matured on a certain level, and there might be deeper layers, for me to grieve.
Yeah. So grief is always the essence, I think, of sadness. There's different layers, right? Like, sadness could be a disappointment, and then there's a tiny grief in there. There's something that we expected or looked forward to that isn't happening, and there's a small grief. And then there's the depth of grief that comes with something like a lost parent, or friend or lover to death itself. That is it. I find with death, it is, and I'm new to this. Only a year and a half after my father passing, and a few other deaths in my life, not as close to me, but it's something that we're never fully done with, because it has its own intelligence. So we want to be gentle with ourselves and allow it to have its seasons. For me, I may have a few months where I don't get super activated around my father's death, but then there's suddenly a song, a photo, or a holiday, something just opens the floodgates, and all of that trauma and anguish and loss and pain emerges. And so when it comes to showing up to that, I think there's a few things we can do. For one, there can be just the orientation of, grieving and feeling sadness. It's a way of us being in the depth of our love. And it's healthy, it's honoring, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful part of the human experience. And I don't think any of us, if we were really, really honest with ourselves, if we could choose a life that had no sadness and no grief and only joy and only excitement, would we really choose that? I don't think we would. I think it's part of the dynamicism of being alive. And it, on some levels, some might say it was chosen by us. And so with that, with orienting towards it as a moment of feeling the depth of love, when we feel it, when grief arises, when the floodgates open, or we're in that state of disappointment, how much can we open to it? It's just like a commitment of opening. I feel this. I may be conditioned to close and stuff it, but I'm going to honor it because it's my psyche is doing such a good job of protecting me at all times. There's a reason I don't feel that constantly. It would be totally destabilizing. So now is a gift opportunity. It's a moment where I get to open the doors all the way in relationship, in collaboration with my psyche, who has allowed this opportunity for me to feel the fullness of my love. So that's part of it, is just feeling and listening for when those opportunities to honor arrive, and then going into it fully. You can really do the experience of saying to yourself, open into this, and just letting it flow and letting the catharsis happen. Like, just like anger, the tears want to be gutturally sobbed. They want to be felt. They want to bless your face. And when we may also notice that we've had a long period of numbness, that's where we get to sort of invite it in. And there are different rituals of practice that we can do with this. And for me, something that's been really useful, with relationship, for example, like a transforming or transitioning or, painful relationship, there's the opportunity to create an altar, or, maybe you put your sacred items from that altar, that relationship on that altar, or you take photos and adorn it with the beauty of the relationship. And you let yourself feel the pain of like the end of this season of that, and you face it, just choosing, I can feel I'm not looking at this, I'm gonna look. And looking can also look like writing, it can be writing the story of something and signing at the end, and letting yourself feel the emotion that comes with saying the end, like what's there for you, what wants to flow. And with, there's even, like, for me with my father, I did a grief ceremony for my former self and acknowledging my father on the solstice this year. And part of my devotion that I designed was just, I'm going to stay up all night and tell the story. And this is a practice from Martin Pritchell's The Smell of Rain on Dust, which is an incredible book for grief. But he describes this ritual of taking a bead and tying a string to it. And you stay up all night singing the songs of the story of this person's life until the sun rises. And I did that this year. I did it with my own story and my own failures, so to speak, and my own wounds, and every wound I had experienced, and it included my father, and it was very difficult. It was very difficult to stay up all night long. It was painful, but it was powerful. Like, it was a magical commitment. And it's something that it opens doors if you show up to it with intention. And it can look like anything. It can be, reading, writing, prayer, facing it. And it can just be the soft moment where you have an emergent emotion and you just open to it.
Yeah. Did you have, would your mind wander off while you were trying to stay up all night and, stay with that ritual? So I have these mala beads, and, sometimes I just try to recite the same thing 108 times and I can't even get through that. So I can't imagine,
Yeah, to be honest, it was interesting because I had this romantic idea of like my night would be so full of all of this presence. And there's a certain point where your body is like, I'm out. Yeah. I want to go to bed. And it's so being gentle with myself in that process and allowing the devotion to be like, maybe I am just sitting at my altar. And I did that for some of the time, but I'm here. Yeah. And my father's picture is right here. And, the little artifacts or whatever of what I'm grieving are all present. I had my little flower basket from when I was a little girl, honoring my inner child. It's all here, and I'm here. And that when the sun rose and my eyes burned and I felt like I felt like a shell of myself, it was like okay, that was a lot more glorious in my mind, but I showed up, and I showed up in a way I never have in a year and a half, finally. And so, yeah, it was hard. And that
Yeah.
happens too, like with mantra for sure. And it's just a practice, and like honoring honor yourself and your ritual. Did I do it? Of course
Mm.
I'm going to be human, and my mind's going to wander a little bit, or it may not look exactly the way that I expected it to, but I did it because I love, and it's
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah. I remember that photo of yours. I think you had posted about it. And yeah, I could tell that it had been a powerful experience. Like, I don't know,
Yeah.
just like that morning light and that like sleepy look on your face. And I was like, okay, like
Oh,
she did
yeah.
something intense there.
It was funny. I mean, I've had some all-nighters with, Burning Man and parties and things. And
Yeah.
I will say it is not that different. I was on no substances whatsoever. I didn't do a medicine journey or anything of that nature. I stayed purely with my own consciousness, and sleep is a real deal thing. Like, we need it. And that's its
Yeah.
own kind of psychedelic experience, because I felt like I was in another dimension after staying up
Yeah.
that long like that.
The like 2 to 4 a.m.
Oh
bit
yeah.
there, oh, that gets intense.
Oh.
Yeah. You kind of touched on it, but a good ritual for the death of self, and I don't mean obviously the literal physical death, but when you go through like a big transformation over a long period of time, and this is really goes back to like anchoring it instead of setting the stage.
Absolutely. I love this. So that's what I just moved through. I, like I said earlier about my spiritual practice and my identity, like I kept trying to do both. And this doesn't mean we have to totally die to who we are. I had this sort of, I was fed up. I was just, I got it to a point of, I was really ready to change, because I recognized what it was costing me. It was costing me the birth of my creative work. It was costing me intimacy, me clinging to this persona that was familiar and felt safe in my nervous system, but was actually destructive to my becoming. It became such a passionate desire that it was almost easy at that point. It was like, I want this. I don't know what it looks like yet, but I know that it's time to discover who my soul wants me to be. So I would have loved if it took me just 1 week. I tried to force it. I got like a healer and a coach, and I went
Yeah,
all
that's
in.
the ego timeline again.
Oh yeah, the ego timeline was there too. The soul was present. She was just sitting back like, that's cute. This
Yeah.
is going to take you 3 months. And it's really been happening for 10 years. It's been
Wow.
happening already for 10 years. And that was a big illumination. Was like, I wasn't conscious of it, but that was ready to go a long time ago. So in essence, even though it took me 3 months instead of 2 weeks, like I wanted it to, it also had been building on itself for years and years. And every time I went into a process, the invitation was there, but I didn't show up to it fully. So what I did that was really powerful, this is sort of its own whole conversation. It's something I'm going to be sharing publicly and really trying to help guide people through, is what I called the Transfiguration. And this came to me intuitively, but what I recognized was the way that I related to myself in my identity was really imbued with all of the old ways of being. There were tons of spells I was casting on myself and my identity. So we do this work around, internal family systems, where we have parts and we have like our inner child and our shadow, and how much mana and energy I was giving to my shadow by just talking constantly about my shadow work. It was like, I was so identified with being the shadow person. There wasn't really space in my expression to discover what more it was. Like, I was really associated with darkness. Like, I thought I was just this really dark, like, person that had this deep shot. And I thought, like, that's my medicine. Oh, honey, if you have a lot of darkness, you also have a lot of light. Where's the space for your light? Like, where in my identification with myself was I actually allowing the fullness of me to come in? And so part of my process in this in this experience was I had this disruptive energy in my nervous system. I felt this fed upness, this readiness. And what emerged from me was a map of transfiguration where I looked at my darkness and all these parts of myself that I was so focused on fixing. And I created a polar identity, like who's the powerful expression of shadow in Caitlyn? Let's name her. Let's ask her what she has to say, what's she here for? And I called it my League of Queens. And I created this, this is going to sound really weird, but it worked. It works. And it's something I will be empowering for a long time. But rather than being, stuck in these wounded parts and these shadows parts and how I identified myself, I called in the other half of that spectrum. And I made a commitment to myself, like these parts, these protectors, these shadow parts, I'm going to let them die because they want to die. And I'm going to do that in every way that I can. And so I listened, like, how can I help them die? I got into breath work. They wanted to feel, they wanted to be acknowledged. They wanted their story told. So I stayed up all night, on the solstice, telling their story, honoring their pain. And I took my bundle of yarn to the sunrise. And I recognized in that moment, as the sun crossed the horizon, that I had yet to give them gratitude. I was telling the story of all their pains and missteps. And it was like, oh, wait, here's the rest of the story. You lived an epic life. You spread love and joy around the world like glitter. You are magnificent and loved already by so many people. Thank you. Thank you for being the soil of the person that I came here to be. And I blew that love into the bundle, along with all of the sorrow and all the guilt and all the shame. And that's a piece of, going through these processes of honoring the self that we have been. It's telling the story, feeling the feelings, listening to what wants to be acknowledged and honored, and giving it gratitude and reverence and exalting it to its true divine nature. Because those parts of ourselves that are ready to die, they are divine. They serve their purpose. They are perfect too. And another ritual for me with this was taking care of business. I think we move in spirals and we have karmic cycles of experience that feel really familiar because the soul wants us to resolve something, like the psyche. So the psyche means soul. And psyche, as we experience it in our consciousness, it keeps track of what we haven't finished, and it haunts us. And so another way to really empower these transformations that we put ourselves into in the ritual of, say, the death of self, the transformation of self, the transfiguration of self, is to, what's the business that needs to be finished here? And maybe that's a conversation, a brave conversation that needs to happen with somebody. Maybe that's something that's been written but not completed. Maybe that's one brave effort, one leap off the cliff, one job that you leave, one relationship you leave. Like, what is the unfinished business here for this part of me, so the new part can be born? And that's really, really powerful too.
Does that tie in at all into like this devotion practice that you're establishing now? Or do you feel like you had a ritual for like the death of self and it stays kind of like in the past and you're working towards something new?
No.
Or is there a bit of like
I will
overlap?
never, I will say humility every step of the way. I'm never gonna, I shouldn't even say never. I don't know. I might think maybe I will at some point think I've completely finished something, but I will say I moved through this. Oh, this reminds me of another important part of this. I moved through this experience of really shedding, feeling, finishing business, and ritually honoring the former self. And I did a ritual baptism in the ocean, facilitated by a few of our mutual friends in just last Thursday. And the way it all wove together was extraordinary and beyond description, but it was really powerful. And I could feel that all the work I had done had led me to that moment that had just aligned. So you can crystallize your efforts with a ritual like a baptism and being witnessed and claiming in prayer, claiming in witness to your community. This is how I want to walk. This is my commitment. This is what I'm empowering in myself. This is what I'm calling in. And you can move through a beautiful threshold of ritual like a baptism, or you plant a garden or something to signify new growth. But be humble, because you never know what's still there. Like, it's very powerful and effective. And I like to venture to believe that sealed it, but I know there's integration after that. So I have to now walk and show up in devotion to what I claimed to make it real. Because if I just did the baptism thing and I didn't have a commitment and I didn't show up in devotion in this certain way, that's a nice thought, but it's not grounded in the 3D here and now present moment living reality. And so, yes, for my current devotional practices, I move into 2022 and the rest of my life, there is a new sacred relationship to everything that I learned from that experience. So the woman that I was very, very distracted, very disordered and chaotic, and butterfly energy. You can't capture her. She's everywhere, etc. Well, what's the complementary polar to that? It's deep presence. What's deep presence is intimacy with the present moment. And so every opportunity that I have in my days going forward is intimacy with life. That's how I can, build that muscle in this body who's used to behaving a certain way and actually make it real and see what emerges from that. And I can honor everything that I learned and did and experienced that led me up to that epiphany that, oh, this is the gift on the other side of shadow. This is the gift I get to live now because of all the hard work I've done. And I know that world too. So I can hold it in compassion in myself when it surely arises again, and in the world around me in a truly relatable way that says, like, I have walked that and I know it. I know how hard it is. I know how it feels to run. I know how it feels to dissociate. And now I want to feel everything and be present to everything. And I get to do that too. Yeah.
Yeah. You've been such a compass for like how to process emotions and stages of life, and like just like such a beautiful guide for me over the last year. And this conversation is just kind of like wrapping it all up in a beautiful, present with a bow on top. So thank you for sharing that. One of my favorite parts in your calls was always the guided meditations. They've always like taken me on these like introspective journeys, and I thought it would be nice for whoever's listening to the podcast to experience that as well. Having said that, I do realize some people are driving or at the gym, while they listen to their podcast, as I often do. So I'll come back to it in a couple of minutes, because the last question I like to ask my guests is, what is spirituality to you? Everyone has their own definition, and I just love hearing what it is for everyone. So what is spirituality for Caitlyn?
Oh, what a great question. Spirituality for me is it's an adventure. It's a beautiful adventure into the unknown, the mystery of who we are and where we are and why. And it's rich with revelation. I think this is one of the beautiful qualities of not knowing, is when we don't know, we get the gift of revelation. We get to realize something that wasn't there before. And that's the beauty of the consciousness in our bodies as human beings. And so spirituality for me can, at any time I'm in this flow of discovery, of touching revelation, in the unknown, whether that's being on a walk in nature, picking up my pen and seeing what comes through, engaging with life, having a dream, going into medicine ceremony, or going into a ritual. It's all spirituality to me.
How can people find you? What's the best way for them to connect with you? And do you have any events or anything else you want to use
Yeah.
this platform to share?
Yes. So easiest to find me on Instagram at The Poet Queen. I currently primarily work with the Fit for Service group. You can find information to work with us on Aubrey Marcus's page, aubreymarcus.com/fit for service or /fit for service, whatever the slash is. We are having a really awesome New Year program where it's going to be more offerings. We're going to be doing core summits as we've been doing with you, Daniel, and then also some smaller immersive. So I will be holding a women's event beginning of April. It has not yet been announced, but it's going to be really, really juicy and beautiful and expressive. And it's going to be all about really connecting to the intelligence of the body and reclaiming our self-love in a really holistic way.
Yeah, we're back.
All right.
I'm glad I had the foresight to tell you that this does tend to happen. I don't think I've had a single episode yet where there wasn't some kind of technical.
We almost got there.
Almost.
It was fairly good timing, all things considered, I would say.
Yeah, that's true. So you were saying aubreymarcus.com/fit for service.
So yeah, exactly. I will be offering the women's event for Fit for Service in the beginning of April and other events throughout the year through the Fit for Service umbrella. I'm also doing a retreat with Whitney Miller in May. I will be hosting my own events and ecstatic dances throughout the year. So you can find out more on my Instagram page, and I am launching a website soon. I won't send people there quite yet because it's very bare bones, but I'm going to be sharing out newsletters, blogs, writing. Lots coming from me this year. I'm ready to be of service in a way that I never have before, and I'm super excited.
Amazing. When are you writing a book? Because there's a future timeline where Caitlyn writes a book.
That's exactly. So you heard it here first. I'm releasing a poetry book this year. I have the poetry collection put together. I have the title. It's just like a matter of really getting it into print. That will probably be self-published, but I also have a memoir I've been working on for years, and I'm getting a lot of nudges to return to that. And I think there's a beautiful timing in my life right now, which is like, I wanted, just like we talked about earlier with the ego, my ego wanted to be done with that book 5 years ago. It wasn't ready until now. So the book process is a longer process, but let's hope I give birth to all of those creative babies this year and that people can be holding them in their hands soon.
Awesome. If people are not driving, not at the gym, and somewhere where they can sit or lie down and close their eyes, the floor is yours.
Okay. I love this. I will close my own eyes too. I'm going to drop into this with you guys. If you're in a place where you can relax completely, go ahead and just tune into the gentle, natural rhythm of your breath, allowing it to move like gentle, shimmering light into your third eye, down your throat, into your lungs, opening the heart space and washing the heart with light, allowing it to open, continuing into the belly with every breath, going a little bit deeper in gentle, natural breath. And deeper again on the next breath, going all the way to the base of the spine, perhaps even down to the toes, the bottoms of your feet, creating a channel with your entire being for the intelligence within you and all around you to merge into one fluid line of truth. As you come into presence in your own being, use the next breath to follow the pathway into your heart. And with the power of your imagination, tracking the breath down into the mystery of your heart and all of its wild intelligence, I'd like you to envision your heart as an altar. It doesn't need to look like anything, just see what it wants to be. How does this altar of reverence in your sacred heart appear to you? What's in the center? Giving a moment for your soul to inform your vision, letting the mind's ideas of should and right fall away like dust in the wind. Just seeing what's already there. And on this altar of your heart, I want you to place something on the right side. If you don't know what that is, just look down in your hands in your imagination and see what you're holding right now. Something, maybe it's something important that you want to do, create, or give to the world. Feeling an object that represents this gift, this sacred mission, placing it on the altar of your heart on the right side. And feeling again into your palms, in your beautiful imaginal realm, feeling for something sacred that you want to experience, you want to receive, maybe you want to feel. Feeling a symbol for that sacred item that signifies what you want to receive. More than anything, allowing yourself to want, feeling the vulnerability of saying, I want this. I want this. Feeling where your heart might constrict with fear that if you ask for it, maybe you won't get it. Loving yourself enough to say it. This is what I want to experience. This is what I want to receive. And holding that treasure in your palm, letting yourself feel it with your fingertips before you place it on the left side of the altar of your heart. Taking a deep, gentle breath into your lungs as you face the sacred space within you. Acknowledging both what you want to give and what you want to receive. Feeling the deep reverence that you hold for these sacred desires, this offering and this prayer. How much reverence already is in you for these things, how you strive each day for both sides of the experience of life. And just in a stroke of genius, creative magic, I'd like you to make your altar even more beautiful here in this space. Add anything to it that you desire. Flowers, crystals, maybe a presence of a loved one kneeling beside you, maybe the elements of nature, singing into your prayers. And whatever is in the center, acknowledging it as a symbol of your heart, allowing it to grow, flourish, transform, take shape in any way that it wants to now, as this all clarifies. Knowing it is just right, just the way you created it. And in humility, deep respect, and immense love, seated, kneeling, bowing at this sacred space within yourself, feel for the intelligence within you that informs you, how can I honor this space? Perhaps I build it in the physical. Perhaps I come to it in the mental. Perhaps I give myself the gift every day of closing my eyes and returning here to allow it to take shape and flow and change and grow. Perhaps I pray. Perhaps I bless my food every single time I sit with this prayer and this vision in my mind's eye. A moment of silence to feel your truth, your guidance, and your intelligence informing you how you can honor this space in one small, tiny way, in many ways. Holding the question, how do I want to honor this space? What would feel good for me? Breathing in the expansive energy of that direction, informing all of your cells of this new path of reverence, this moment of clarity. You take that sacred map of ritual reverence back up with the breath and open our eyes back into the day with a new promise to the sacred within.
Thank you so much for doing this and for accepting my invitation. I love you so much, and I'm so grateful for you and just everything. I always have trouble expressing it. Like, I try to say bye to Aubrey, in Sedona, and I was like, I don't even know what to say. Like, it's a lot. One day maybe I'll find the words, but yeah.
I feel you, bro. I feel you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You've given me just as much. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you for inviting me and sharing your time with me and inviting me to share this medicine with all of your listeners.
Yeah. I'll see you soon, I'm sure. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Have a beautiful day.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Bye.